Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala ashraf al-mursaleen wa ala alihi wa ashabi walladhina yattaba'unahum ila yawm ad-din. Alhamdulillah, I'm very honored to have this opportunity for this space to talk about not something that is of a past, but an era in which I live and that is continuing. When I looked at the title, annual conference, Heroes of Islam, Past, Present, and Future, it says a lot. It says that we as a ummah have not forgotten the work and the commitment of those, and we show our gratitude and appreciation for their trials. Now, a little bit about myself. Our brother mentioned I am an author. And the first book that I wrote was, because I am a second generation to navigate, survive as a Muslim, foremost in a racist society that was under legislation, when schools segregated and segregated rest, and also survived New York City, New Jersey, the drug epidemic, but at the same time maintain a distinct Islamic identity at all costs. The second book, co-authored with my father, Alhamdulillah, and why it was necessary to read that narrative to a generation who has very little information about the real life of Malik Shabazz. I also have a publication, Bilal ibn Rabah, Colorism and Racism in Islam, classical text looking at and biasness that crept into Islam, the history of Islam in America, a tabletop magazine that will be available. Today is From Shahada to Shaheed. As Allah Ta'ala has تقول لمن يقتل في سبيل الله بل أحياء ولكن لا تشعرون. We do not say or speak those who have been slain in the way or in the way of Islam dead. They are alive and cannot perceive it. And I had to do a subtitle, A Hero Amongst Heroes. Batalun min al, a hero rose. And I say that because Al-Hajj Malik did not evolve in a vacuum. There were circumstances and conditions that life gave birth to a personality. We need to know that. And I just want to pay attention to a picture here. Is anyone here that was 1943, raise 1965, raise your hands. MashaAllah. The picture here is not Islam, but it is. This was Islamic conference ever conducted in America. These people here, just take a first, the picture. There's 1720 Christian Street in Philadelphia in front of these men and women. They are one generation moved. It's more than that their parents were slaves. So they had a terrible and an uncertain future. But yet, chose to be Muslim. Be Muslim. This particular was actually the Bureau of Investigation knew exactly there. You know, history books cited 7 organizations, and I want to focus on is the one standing. Professor Muhammad Izzuddin, the one to his person from the Ahmadiyya representation. Far left is Sheikh Ahmed. The one to the right of Izzuddin is Sheikh Nasir Ahmed, and to the far right of him is Hajj. And then we have one Imam. You see, when we're talking about, we have to know every hero has a villain. لِكُلِّ بَطَلٍ شَرِيرٍ. Hero, there's a villain. So these men, who I consider to be heroes, because a hero is someone who displays courage and bravery, and they inspire us. Okay? And share the same heroes. We may have been people in our lives. But this photo, them personally. I visit them. I know their offsprings. You see history. You see, this is not journalism. You see? Because we are cutting through the. Let's start with Professor Muhammad Izzuddin. Okay. This is Professor Muhammad Izzuddin. If you look center, you see a person with a yellow square on around his face, and the one who has the one in the middle, Noble Drew Ali, and the one to the right is Izzuddin. And it is important that we understand that, because the more, right, after the more Temple of Science. 1928, Noble Drew Ali himself removed himself from with Professor Muhammad Izzuddin. He was known at that time as James Lomax. And the reason why is because I'm trying to, okay, reality that Islam came to America on the ship. Islam came to America on the transatlantic slave trade that here before it was founded, which was 1770, came in the 1400s. In the 1400s. When you look at the 1,800 pages, they never mention Muslim from the African, yet they will show you a culture of a people held in captivity for over 3 years, knowing that 30 people came to America, came from Muslim land. This is your regular history. As you look at the signature, you see Drew Ali and you see James. Why understand Lomax Bay? Because the Moors in their very inception were Muslims. The dean was influenced by Muhammad Ali, who established in 1926 Universal Islamic Society. Ali introduced Garvey, and he gave the American Muslims an alternative view to the unorthodox practices of the Ahmadiyya. So it's important that we understand that. Not only was Professor Ezzeddin influenced by Deuce Ali, he was also influenced by Seti Majid, Sheikh al-Islam, who came from Sudan in the early 20s. And he established 4 organizations. Hands, anyone familiar with Seti Majid? Give me a show of hands. Okay. We got to do an Islamic curriculum about Islamic history. And he is best known for his own autobiography, Al-Intishar al-Islam fi America, the propagation or the spread of Islam in America. And his greatest feat is when he obtained a fatwa, a legal ruling against the deviation of the Moorish Science Temple. It's very important that we understand that. And moving forward. And as Drew Ali was insubordinate, they came with a letter of removal. And in that letter, it says Lomax Bey, that was Ezzeddin's name prior, has violated divine laws of the Prophet, speaking of Drew Ali, even before the Prophet's face, 15 of February 1929. Okay? So look at the very bottom. It said, he is a traitor and an enemy to the divine creed. Every hero has a villain. Okay? It's important that we understand. Now, if you go to the next slide, you will see it says Detroit Negroes, Muslims hunt jobs in Turkey. This is in 1930. If I ask you today or tonight, name me 3 Muslims that has made a great difference in the very inception of Islam, you would say Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, and Imam Wahidi Muhammad. Yarhamumullah. Of course, they made an impact. But it shows you there have been 2 generations or 3 generations of misinformation. And it shows you that there have been a concerted effort to contain, retain, marginalize, and restrict the growth of Islam, because they have deprived you of that rich history. And of course, they could not find substantial livelihood in Turkey. But why did they go to Turkey? Turkey was the caliphate at that time. So they went to a place where they could find refuge with Muslims. You have no idea what racism is, discrimination. These are not just words, these are systems, these are ideologies that was put in place to control the total mental state of a human being. So they made a hijrah. That was the first migration of Americans to Turkey. Okay? And it says the would-be Moses find no color prejudice, nor free farms either. They went there, they couldn't find, but they didn't find racism there. And we're going to move forward. And as a result, Professor Muhammad Ezzeddin went to Al-Azhar, where he spent 5 years studying Islam in an institution that Seti Majid himself supported and recruited students to go there and study Islam. And he came back in 1936 and he established the Adinullahi Universal Arabic Association, and he chartered it in 1938 in New Jersey. And not only that, he went forward and he established it in New York as well. Again, you have FBI surveillance, who talks about the progress of a Muslim. We have 617 pages of declassified files on our organization, how they infiltrated, interrogated, and restrict its growth. So when we're talking about heroes, I'm saying this to say that Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, there was an environment, there was a climate, there was a ladder placed before him so he could climb to reach his full development as a Muslim who could say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. And not only that, we established a Muslim community. You know, this is where we grew up in Ezzeddine Village in Hamilton, New Jersey, in this state. Me and my brothers, Imam Ali, Taha, Rashid, we would all go there and we would study Islam because of the efforts of these people. And not only that, we established a community in West Valley, New York. And even today, we own 300 acres of land. It belongs to the Muslims. It belongs to the Muslims. And the next person that was in that photo is Sheikh Dawood Faisal. He established the Islamic mission. He too was a student of Seti Majid. It's important that we know these pioneers. And not only that, they followed the course and they too purchased land and built a Medina in New York. And Sheikh Dawood Faisal was the UN representative for the Muslims in America for a long time. In fact, that was the first member at the age of 18 where I delivered my first khutbah. MashaAllah. So this is the history of those who went before us. And the other person was Imam Hajj Nasr Ahmed. He was the first, believe it or not, Ahmadiyya Sheikh in the Ohio Valley of Pennsylvania. When he met Professor Muhammad Ezzeddine, he changed his theology and he got on the Sunnah. And he established the International Muslim Brotherhood, which is today known as Cuba Institute, who was ran by Nafi Abdul Muhammad. And Nafi Abdul Muhammad's son, Sheikh Anwar, was the first American-born Hafiz with Ijazah. The first-born American Hafiz with Ijazah, coming out of those schools. And the last person, I think, was Hajj Wali Akram, the first mosque of Cleveland. Who's familiar with the first mosque of Cleveland? Show of hands. When Imam Wali Akram started out, he was of the Ahmadiyya persuasion. Upon contact with Muhammad Ezzeddine, he became on the Sunnah. Subhanallah. And Imam Abbas Ahmed is not his son. That's his grandson. And he's the Imam there today at the first mosque of Cleveland. And of course, we have our dear brothers in Detroit. In fact, the first masjid was built by the Qurra brothers. They built it from the ground, and 3 years later, they had to destroy it. We don't have enough time to talk about why they destroyed the masjid. So this is important, and that was one of the representatives standing in that photo. Now let's just pause here a minute. Muhammad Alexander Russell Webb. Show of hands who familiar with him. I'm sure his literature is out there. Come on now, let me see some hands. Subhanallah. You know what is so unique about this person? Is that he became a Muslim without ever seeing a Muslim. Can you see the mu'jiza of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? All he did was gather religious materials and began to read it. And from that, he made a comparison and he became a Muslim. And they tried to say, you know, he was Ahmadiyya, but he was not an Ahmadiyya. In fact, when he went to India, he refused to visit the city of Qadiani. He was a Muslim, mashallah. And he was the only Muslim, the only person who represented Islam in the first world, the world's first religious parliament in 1893. and he was American born. And of course, my hero, number one, first, my father, Haji Sham Jaabar, Yarhamullah. He has to be my hero. That's why I'm here. You know, our father is the closest to us besides our mothers. We have our mothers and we have our fathers. And I had to do what he said. So, of course, that's my hero. But he was my father. He was my sheikh. He was my confidant. He was my companion. And I think that I am who I am today because of the influence of my father. And I heard the brothers say that Sheikh Muhammad did a great job with his children. And I always say that children make better parents. I think that the fact that you have children and you want the best for them cause you to improve your life. So I refuse the credit. I put it on my children, mashallah. But let us get into the last 10 minutes I have. Al-Hajj Sham Jaabar on the right and Malcolm X on the left. What brought these two men together? Or do we know that they came together? That my father was a part of the transitional team to influence Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz to denounce the theology of the Nation of Islam and come upon the Sunnah. Malcolm was the national representative and the spokesman for the NOI, and my father was the national imam for 13 units, 13 communities of the Deen-ul-Lahi Universal Arabic Association. And he wrote a book about this, and it's very important that we understand that this is the only book that is written by a Muslim about the Islam of Malcolm. Okay? I say that again. This is the only book that we have that's written by a Muslim about the Islam of Malcolm. Because we know that this is the Malcolm Bible, but Alex Haley, he falls short because it takes a Muslim to articulate the iman, the faith, the transition, and that tawakkul, and that sacrifice, to walk away from ad-dunya and for exchange for the akhirah. So we do have that book available, inshallah, for our youth and also for those who may be interested in the real life of Malcolm X. And you know, my father put on the back of the book, and we put it on the back, but my father made this quote. He said, where the Muslim world had been silent, we had been outspoken. Where the world had been shocked and confused, we had been steadfast and organized. Where all had succumbed to fear and threat, we affirmed our faith in Allah for the world to witness. Because when Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz was assassinated, not only the goon squad who was advocating violence for those who came near, also the State Department got involved. And that's why you did not see any of our brothers and sisters of foreign status being involved with Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz. But let's move forward. We're just going to run through these slides. He mentioned the book, the movie, Malcolm X. Of course, it's inspired a lot of people, but look at what his sister said, Ella Collins, on the bottom, symbolism without substance. And you have to know the real Malcolm and the real transition for that quote to actually resonate on you. Again, Malcolm X, the autobiography of Malcolm X, as told by Malcolm. I call it the Malcolm Bible. That's the Malcolm Bible. But I say it is as told by Alex. Why do I say that? It's because Malcolm said, I trust you 70%. Okay? And not only that, if you can look at the right where they was doing the editing, Alex and Malcolm was in disagreement as to how he should express himself. So if it wasn't politically correct, he would redline it, or he would try to get Malcolm to get a soft line to say. And not only that, we know that there was 3 chapters that was left out. We know that Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz and Alex had a joint agreement. So Betty had to sue Alex's brother to get her money because he didn't live up to his promise. So suspect. That's all I want to say. But when we look at Malcolm, who is Malcolm? Ask yourself the question, because Malcolm reinvented himself more than one time. More than one time. Malcolm Little, the troubled child who suffered trauma when his home was burned, his father was killed when he was 6. His mother ended up in a sane asylum when he was 13, and she spent 25 years of her life there. Look at the impact that had on Malcolm. And then you have Malcolm X. He turned to a life of crime and drugs, and he landed himself a prison sentence. And that's where he reinvented himself, Malcolm X, because he wanted a platform to fight back. Malcolm was angry. And I don't think Malcolm was angry enough based on the climate in which he lived in. He had no way to vent. And of course, as we know, as Malcolm elevated in ranks, you know, the fraudulent slip when he said it's a case of the chicken coming home to roost. And that's when everything started going downhill. Every hero has a villain. And of course, it didn't take long before they said, get rid of this guy. So Malcolm was kicked out of the Nation of Islam, and he was on his own, and he formed 2 organizations, the Muslim Mosque Incorporated and also the OAAU, Organization for Afro-American Unity. It's very important that we stay focused on this, because I'm going to show you something that's very unique in Malcolm's life. Look at that document. April 6, 1964. This is when Malcolm is at the corporate bank making an account for his organization, Muslim Mosque Incorporated. And look at the signatures at the bottom. Malcolm Little, Earl Grant, and James Warden. Okay, it's important. 2 days later, Malcolm is taking the Shahada. He's denouncing the NOI philosophy, and he's accepting Islam, okay? But look at the name, Malik Shabazz. Not only did he leave the nation, he left the name with him. Okay, and he took Shahada, and we know that when you take Shahada, you have to denounce something, and you have to affirm to something, okay? Now, a very historic picture. Malcolm is sitting with not King Faisal, but who? Prince Faisal. Malcolm was in Arabia 2 years after the abolishment of slavery. Slavery was abolished in Saudi Arabia in 1962. When my father made Hajj in 1962, the kingdom of Saudi Arabia still held people in captivity. SubhanAllah. So you would wonder what type of conversation they are having. I want to bring your attention to this in my closing. Malcolm, he went to Mecca. He took Shahada. You know, Iman is in the heart. You can say it with your tongue. You can put it in your limbs, but Iman is in the heart. And Malcolm himself had entered into a state of ihram, but he still maintained the theology of the Nation of Islam. And he said he had to make a decision, a choice between that which Elijah had been teaching, or he was going to follow the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ. And that comes with the testimony. And that's why when he wrote, "You may be shocked by these words coming from me," he was writing to Earl Grant and James 67X. Because when Malcolm left, he had the theology of the Nation of Islam, and when he returned, he was a Muslim. And that's why Earl Grant said, "I love the black philosophy, but I couldn't get with the religion." So it's important. And of course, as we know, Malcolm said that he think that he may be the first Negro, and that was a term that was used for people who was displaced, but it has no cultural integrity to it, but that was the way they classified people who come from the African diaspora. He said he would think he would be the first American Haji. And he was unaware that we had many Hajis, okay? From Abdul Rashid, we had Hajj Hassan 52, Wali Akram, my father made Hajj in 62, Hajj Talib in 64. So what I'm saying is that when you read the narrative of I buried Malcolm, if you start from here, you're gonna miss the past, because to me, this is the present. And of course, as we know, Malcolm was given assistance from the Muslim World League, scholarships to train his people. He was given ijazah from Al-Azhar to teach Islam. And Malcolm was not just a person who was oblivious of Islam. He had been challenged many times in his life. One of the person was Ahmed Usman from Sudan. And you see a letter there where Malcolm continued correspondence. And Malcolm himself said, I never ceased to be impressed by the Sudanese. Why? Because we lived in a time when there was marginalization, racism, segregation, and it was Jim Crow enforced. But the Sudanese Muslims, the black Arabs, could navigate and go into the black community and teach them Islam without anyone recognizing them. But our brothers from Syria, from Lebanon and Jordan and places like that, there would have been reprisals and repercussions if they saw them, hands off my Negro, as they would say. And also, Saudi Arabia stretched their hands out to try to bring Elijah Muhammad under the banner of Islam. Have anyone seen that photo before? Do you know he's sitting in a camel in Mecca? He made the Umrah. And that's his son, Akbar Muhammad, sitting beside him. And at the bottom, he's in the Sudan. And again, you see that his children, they was taught Islam. And Imam Walid Muhammad himself considers himself a convert. And this is his son, Akbar Muhammad, who obtained a PhD in Islamic sciences, and he served on the American Fiqh Council for many years. Very profound, very prolific Muslim. And of course, Malcolm, from Malcolm to El-Hajj Malik Shabazz, it led up to his death. Do you know who that person is right in front of him with the square? That is Yuri Kochiyama. She was the only non-black member of the OAAU. She took her Shahada in 1971. And my father got the call upon Malcolm's assassination, and you see these two coffins. I guess you wonder why Malcolm is in two coffins, one with the Western suit and one in the Ihram, because no one wanted to touch him. No one wanted to touch him. So it was Sheikh Ahmed Hassoun from Sudan who washed him and gave the body to my father. And my father himself took the risk to bury Malcolm. If he's only standing by himself, there's someone standing at his left, and actually that's the wrong side, but you know, that's the type of tension that was in the building. And my father not only did janazah, he made sure that Malcolm was buried as a Muslim. And of course, threats failed to materialize as followers buried Malcolm. And of course, I don't have to tell you what my father has his hand on. Thank you very much. My time is up because there's so much history that our generation of Muslims are unaware of. And I've always say, we are destroyed because of lack of knowledge. If we understood the history of Palestine, then we would not be going through this atrocious genocide that we are facing today. By being far removed from that, we see the repercussions. Every hero has a villain. Assalamu alaikum.